A signal failure, the most likely cause of the worst train disaster in India for decades. As relatives lose all hope of finding loved ones alive, it's revealed one train was sent onto the wrong track, resulting in the deaths of almost 300 people. Also tonight, the row escalates between Boris Johnson and the government over what he should disclose to the COVID inquiry. And
the winner of Britain's Got Talent 2023 is Viggo Venn!
A surprise winner of Britain's Got Talent is an entertainer wearing a lot of high vis wins the show.
This is ITV News with Kylie Pentelow.
Good evening. Desperate families have been trying to find loved ones who lost their lives in one of India's deadliest rail disasters as the wreckage was cleared from the site. The most likely cause was an error with a signal, with India's railway board saying there had been some kind of signalling interference. And as our Asia correspondent Debbie Edward now reports, sabotage hasn't yet been ruled out in a devastating crash which killed at least 300 people.
The mangled carriages stacked in a ditch at the side of the train tracks, and the diggers already starting to repair the damage, indicated the rescue operation in Odisha was over. A search for survivors overnight had recovered only more bodies. The intensive care unit at this hospital was overwhelmed with critical patients. Hundreds arrived, many with life-changing injuries. Jyoti Pashwan was returning home with his wife and son. His boy is still missing. Like many on board, these four friends were on their way to Chennai to find work. Mukesh Pandit got trapped in the overhead luggage rack and believes that saved his life.
आदमी सीट पे फूल था, नीचे भी बैठा था, पैर हिलाने का जगह ट्रेन में नहीं था, इतना ही भीड़ था कि बाकी कोई आदमी को नहीं मिला। चार आदमी जो हम लोग थे ये हैं और दो आदमी जो बगल में और बैठा था वही नजर आया, बाकी कोई आदमी नहीं दिखाया।
Railway officials have not ruled out sabotage as a potential cause of the crash. They confirmed a signalling error sent the Coromandel Express onto the wrong track, leading it to smash into a stationary goods train at full speed.
What we have found is that there is probability of some kind of a signalling, not even, I wouldn't even call it a failure, a signalling interference.
The horror of this crash is borne out by the pictures on this table. Almost 300 families received a call to identify their relatives at the morgue. They queued to match images of their loved ones in life with an official photo taken of them in death. What a truly devastating process to endure. The government was due to launch a new high-speed rail service this weekend. It has pledged to improve India's railways, which serve 13 million people every day. But instead of speed, passengers are again calling for greater safety as the country comes to terms with its worst rail disaster this century. Debbie Edward, ITV News.
The teenager who died following the Bournemouth beach tragedy has been named. He was 17-year-old Joe Abbas, who was a trainee chef. In a statement, his family said, "We're heartbroken and devastated at the death of our Joe. He was a wonderful son and brother who is sadly missed." They go on to say, "His family and friends will always love him, and we are incredibly proud of the fabulous young man he was. He was kind and generous, loving and caring, hardworking and funny." Now, the row between Boris Johnson and the government over what he should disclose to the COVID inquiry escalated somewhat today. The former Prime Minister has been warned he will lose his taxpayer-funded legal advice for the inquiry if he undermines the government's position or releases evidence to it without permission. Well, our political correspondent David Wood is here for more on this. So, David, why this threat?
The COVID inquiry has ordered a whole tranche of communications between senior ministers, including Boris Johnson, and some senior officials as we went into the pandemic. But the current government's legal position is, yes, have everything that you need regarding COVID, but will redact some bits that the government sees as irrelevant. An example today, personal details about civil servants, for example. So that's what the government is challenging the inquiry about. But Boris Johnson has since said, well, I'll just hand over my WhatsApps directly to the inquiry if need be. And the government has now written to him and said it doesn't want to restrict what Boris Johnson is going to say or do, but that if he's having taxpayers footing the legal bill, he needs to use that advice appropriately. Now, one barrister who I've spoken to this evening says, remove all the personalities and the politics from this. That threat could set a dangerous precedent.
What is unique is the idea of a threat to remove that funding, to just turn around and go, do you know what, I'm taking it away. You've said something I don't like. The long-term damage actually is to justice, because the long-term damage is you've set a precedent whereby future governments can do this again and again and again.
So, David, some allies of Mr Johnson have questioned this move.
Yeah, we've covered the legal arguments. There are, of course, political ones in this. Some suggesting that the messages could be embarrassing for the current Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. Talk of the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, where discounted meals try to encourage people out to hospitality in the summer of 2020. Also suggestions that the messages might reveal a plot to try and oust Boris Johnson. I've been told that's absolute nonsense. There were no plots, and the government saying it's got nothing to hide. The legal argument, if you like, will be solved by judges. The political one, I think, is a difficult one for Rishi Sunak because it's showing a bubbling up and an increase in tensions between his team and Boris Johnson's supporters and his side. OK. David Wood, thank you very much. A man has been charged for allegedly wearing a shirt to the FA Cup final which appeared to mock the 97 people who died in the Hillsborough disaster. James White, who's 33, has been charged with displaying threatening or abusive writing. He'll appear in court later this month. Max Verstappen's domination of the Formula One season shows no sign of abating after victory at the Spanish Grand Prix. But British drivers still made their mark, with Lewis Hamilton and George Russell both taking places on the podium beside him. Here's Chris Scudder.
Who could stop Verstappen? Answer, not Lando Norris. Third on the grid, but then disaster on the first corner. Hamilton and Norris made contact. The Brits' front wing was damaged, and second lap repairs meant Norris's hopes of a podium finish were wrecked before he'd barely started. But Hamilton escaped unscathed, and his once almost unbeatable Mercedes was in second place, slowly but surely getting more competitive again. And if George Russell has lived in Hamilton's shadow, George made his bid for a podium with a classy overtake into third place.
Solid work. Just solid. It was pretty good.
George Russell! And the good news was he also hung on to it, holding off Sergio Perez for the podium finish. Up ahead, though, a familiar sight. V for victory, Verstappen as usual, 3 wins in a row, 5 in the first 7 races, and another world title looks a formality already. But at least the Brits are on the up, with 2 Mercedes outnumbering the Red Bulls on the podium. Chris Scudder, ITV News.
And finally, if you just missed it, Viggo Venn has been named the winner of this year's Britain's Got Talent. His high-vis act fought off tough competition, from opera singers to aerial acrobats to a child magician. Here's Callum Watkinson.
After a series that has pitted performers from London to Kampala against each other in a riot of sound and colour,
the winner of Britain's Got Talent 2023 is... Viggo Venn!
It was a novelty comedian from Norway who won the hearts and the votes of the public. A singer or a dancer was widely fancied, but in the end, the public preferred the funny man with an obsession with high-vis. And nobody seemed more surprised than the man himself.
Viggo Venn, you are the winner of Britain's Got Talent 2023.
I feel extremely visible right now. Thank you so much.
Who would you like to say? You've clearly captured the heart of Britain. Loads of people have voted for you. What would you like to say to the people who voted for you?
Not just the heart of Britain, but the heart of Simon.
The Ghetto Kids set the tone for the night. Their dazzling moves and sparkling personalities have lit this whole series up. Their hope, if victorious, was to buy a house in Kampala. That may have to wait, but with this energy, surely not for long. Dancer Musa Mota lost his leg at 11 to bone cancer. He had been the bookies' favourite to win the hearts of Britain, but it wasn't to be. A result surely the most unexpected twist in the history of this competition. Callum Watkinson, ITV News.
And that's it from the team here. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.